at the Potomac Bead Company, and today I am doing a nice spring necklace for you guys featuring some of the newer products that we have. I'm calling this the Blossoming Gekko Necklace, and it is going to be using some gecko beads, which you guys may not be familiar with, as well as some pips and some flower cups. So if you need any of these materials for this Blossoming Gekko Necklace, you can look at the top right-hand corner of the screen. There's usually a little eye if you take your mouse over that area. That's information from us as the video creators, and you can kind of look there for links for the different projects. In addition, you can always go below the video where it states when the video was made and produced, the date, and then also additional info for you guys too. And in that additional info, if you scroll down or hit the down arrow, will be the listing of the materials that are used in this necklace, and then links to purchase them online from me if you need to. So the prominent feature here are the actual gecko beads. The gecko beads, if you haven't used them or haven't seen them, I did another video with Sabine Lippert's design, the gecko bracelet. And the geckos are almost like a small pip or a small petal. They have the hole going sideways, and I think they lend themselves really well to making kind of floral designs. So for the geckos, I am going to be using one tube of them in the Crystal Maria Full Matted color. So you're going to use less than a tube, depending on how many little flower sets you want to do and how many you want to make. But you're looking at about half a tube if you want to make the same amount that I am here for the designed necklace. So those are our gecko bead, and the gecko is going to be featured in our smaller floral pieces here, the smaller blossoms, as well as in the middle of our bigger ones. In the very middle of each of the flower blossoms is a flower cup. And I'm choosing the Crystal Magic wine color of the flower cup. And you're only going to need 6 to 7 of these, depending on kind of how many you want to do. If you want to do an odd number, you'll do 7. You need 1 for each of the middle of the flowers. You could also change it up and use a different bead in the middle too, a round bead or something like that. But the flower cups continue with that floral design and give a nice kind of pop to the middle of the blossom. In addition to those on the outside, to make it a bigger and more substantial flower in the middle of the necklace and then on the sides, the blossom here that's in the middle, I'm using some Crystal Magic Wine pip beads. So the pip beads are a little bit kind of like a big gecko, but they don't have kind of the shaping to them. And again, I'm using that Crystal Magic Wine color. So I have those as well. In addition to that, the seed beads that we're going to be using are 15-0s in the metallic mix, which is a Miyuki seed bead, and then it has that check coating of that nice metallic mix, kind of purpley iris and bronzy color with it. You don't see a lot of them. They're kind of hidden underneath, so you could use a different color if you want. You will see a tiny bit kind of in between the creases. In addition to that, I'm sticking with a gold color, so I'm using the Duracoat Galvanized Gold in the 11-0 seed bead that we'll be using along the project. And again, this is the Miyuki brand as well. The whole necklace eventually, and all these little components, you can do with them what you want. You can make them into a bracelet, you can do them post earrings, kind of go crazy with making these blossoms. For the gecko blossoms for my design here, we're going to be attaching that. I'm going to show you guys how to sew them onto some chain. So I have 17 inches here of the Italian oval trace chain in that nice brass color. The whole design with the flowers then are going to be done with some 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the green color. And I'm working with a size 10 beading needle. If you want to, you can work with a size 12, as it does get a little bit smaller in between some of those 15s. That's up to you. I like the stiffness of a 10, so I use the 10s if I can. In addition to the needle, the thread, the chain, you'll need a clasp for your chain if you don't have one on it. I also have sitting handy a thread zap or a thread burner. The knot in this design actually sits kind of right underneath the flower. So in order to get in close and kind of burn down the edges of the thread, I suggest a thread zap 2 or a thread zap ultra or a cord cutter. All of those items do the same thing. They're going to burn down the ends of your thread. So to get started, I'm going to show you guys how to do a big flower, and then I'll show you guys how to do a small flower. So we'll do our big blossom first and then our small blossom. From there, then I will show you guys how to actually incorporate them and to sew them onto the chain so that the design is nice and wearable. It's a nice spring design. You can really change up kind of the look of it. You could do winter flowers with that matte crystal AB of the gecko. Change up the color of the pips as well and really kind of make this your own. So without further ado, we'll get ready to start our blossoming gecko necklace. And for your first blossom, you are going to want about 2 feet of your beading thread. If you want to, you can cut about 5 feet of beading thread, and that will get you a number of these different components ready to go. Stick that on your size 10 or so needle, and we'll get ready to get started with our first large blossom. So we're going to start by making our first of our blossom beads here, and it's the larger blossom. However, the small blossom and the large blossom are going to be done almost in the exact same fashion, except as we get further and bigger into the design, we're going to switch from the gecko beads to the pip beads. So we're going to start out by having our thread and needle, and I want 6 geckos on the thread, starting with a 15-0. I'm going to add the 6 geckos with a 15 between each. So the pattern is just picking up a gecko, 15 gecko, and getting those all right on there. So go ahead and add them in the rows of 6. If you started with a 15, you don't have to end with one, but you want to make sure that if you haven't started with a 15, that you do have a 15 at the end, because we want a 15-0 seed bead between each of the gecko beads. We're going to drop those down towards the bottom here of the thread, and leaving about an inch tail, I'm going to tie this into a circle. This circle is going to become the very center of my blossom. So I'm just sewing a standard knot there, and I have then that circle of the gecko beads. So once you have those 6 gecko beads in the center of the circle, we're going to proceed to adding more geckos. Sew through the gecko next to the knot after giving a nice tight pull so that your thread is coming out, the gecko on the opposite side of that actual knot. From there, we're going to add our next layer of geckos. Our next layer of geckos are going to be 3 geckos, and it is going to be with an 11-0. So my thread and needle are coming out of the first gecko. Add an 11, gecko, 11 to your needle, and you're going to skip the next set of geckos. So you're going to skip and basically do geckos 1, 3, and 5. We're skipping over 2, 4, and 6. In addition to skipping over 2, 4, and 6, we're also skipping over the seed beads that are next to them. So thread and needle in hand, again, we have on the 11, gecko 11. I'm skipping over and sewing through gecko number 3. Give a nice tight pull. When you're coming out of number 3, add 11, gecko 11. Skip over number 4 and the seed beads on either side, and sew through gecko bead number 5. Give a tight pull. Back to kind of the starting side here, 11, gecko 11, and sewing back through bead 1, which is the original bead that we were coming out of. You want to make sure that all of these seed beads are towards the back of the design. Again, those geckos that are kind of towards the front, 3 almost will get pushed towards the very front as we add those 6 in the back. And eventually we'll kind of push those down as we put in our flower cup. From here, we're going to get ready to do our next row of our gecko beads. The next row of gecko beads is going to be the same for both this bigger blossom and the smaller blossom. So up until now, you're doing the exact same beading, and even through this next step, it's going to be the same exact steps for the big and small. With your thread and needle coming out of that first gecko, I want you to sew up through the first 11-0 gecko and 11-0 that you added in the second row. Coming out that 11-0, we're going to add one more grouping of 3 geckos with an 11-0 on each side. So I'm coming out that second 11-0 on the first gecko, and I'm going to sew into the geckos and the 11-0s that we added the last go round. Coming out then the 11-0, you're going to add again a gecko with 11s on each side and go over to that next grouping of 3 that you added. What this does is adds your next row, and it's going to appear as if you have 2 seed beads of the geckos or 2 seed beads of the 11-0s right next to one another. So my last set here, 11, gecko, 11, skip over that original gecko and sew into the 11-0, gecko, 11-0. And that'll get you back to the start. So the first go round, we added the 6 geckos with a 15 in between. The next 2 rounds, the next 2 rows of our geckos, we added 11-0s in between those geckos. When you flip to the front then, you can kind of push that gecko, like I said, up. It'll sit back more so once we get our flower cup in. So at this point here, you're going to have on your project 12 gecko beads. These 12 gecko beads are going to form the base for both the big blossom and the small blossom. Again, I'm doing the big blossom with you first, so now we're going to continue with this step after adding our 12 geckos to start adding our pip beads, which makes that blossom appear larger. To make the blossom appear larger, I want you coming out of and taking your thread and needle through an 11-0 and a gecko, so you're coming out of a gecko. From here, we're going to add a pip bead between all 6 of that second row of geckos, and you'll notice that it's a little bit in a triangular shape. On either side of the pip beads as we add them, pick up a 15-0. So you have a 15-0, a pip, and a 15-0 on the needle. And then you're going to sew over to the next gecko in line. Give a nice tight pull, and that pip will pull in right to that empty space. So again, we're adding 6 pips with 15-0s between each on either side, sewing around between all 6 of those geckos, which are rows 2 and 3 of the geckos that we did. Going around then, you're going to continue sewing through and adding your 6 pips. So I have 3 done here, and I'll keep sewing till I get my other 3 pips in place. So adding in the last of my pip beads, I'm sewing through the first of the actual gecko beads. And that's going to put, when you flip it over, that puts your first 6 of your pips in place, which sit directly kind of to the sides and below the original 12 gecko beads. From here, we're going to come up from the gecko through the first 15 of the pip, through the pip beads, the first pip bead that you put on. Now I'm going to add another row of my pip beads. To add the next row of the pip beads, I want to come out of each pip, add 6 more pips with an 11-0 on each side. So you're sewing then around the pips, just through the pips, with a 15-0, or with the 11-0 rather, on each side. So I'm going around here, you add an 11-0, pip 11-0, kind of push that gecko down and sew through the next pip in line. You can see those pips are now filling in that whole space. Push the thread out of the way. Again, 11, pip 11. So we're going to end up with our 12 geckos and our 12 pips. Make sure as you're adding your pips that the geckos sit in front of the pips. I'm kind of pushing them down with my finger if they want to flip towards the back. And continue adding your last of your pips in as you go the whole way around. Again, you're not going through any of the 15s, you're just going through the pips. Getting your last pip in place then, and you'll sew through the first pip that you put on from the previous row. Make sure that gecko bead gets pushed to the front and pull the pip in place. At this point then you have your blossom pretty much done. What we need to do, however, is go ahead and add in our flower cup. So I'm going to grab one of my flower cups here and get ready to add that in place. To add the flower cup, I'm going to take my thread and needle, coming out one of the pips, sew through an 11-0, a pip, and an 11-0 from that last row that you just added. I'm then going to take my thread and needle, kind of zigzagging back through the project. I'm going to go down to the bead below it, sew through a 15-0 and one of the last rows of the geckos and come out. If you need to, sometimes the needle will come out towards the front of the project. You can then just switch it to the back once it's through. Once it's through, then I'm going to switch it to the back of the project. And it's through one of the 11-0 seed beads on the side of the gecko as well. That's fine. It doesn't matter if it's coming where exactly it's coming out of. You just want it to be on that last row of your gecko beads. I have two 11-0 seed beads that I'm going to put on, and then I'm going to take the thread and needle and come up through the center of my blossom. Next, I'm going to put on my flower cup through so that the stem is down and the flower cup is facing up. In the center of the flower cup, add an 11-0, and then take your thread and needle, so back down through the flower cup and out towards the back of the project. Give a nice tight yank, and that pulls that flower right in the middle of our little blossom. Coming out the back then, we're going to add two more 11s. Let those drop down next to the project. And then wherever your thread and needle was coming out that last interior row of the gecko beads, we're going to jump to the opposite side and sew through the seed bead that's directly across from there. That's going to put the flower cup right in the middle so that when you look at it, you kind of see that bridge of two beads hanging out there. From there, we need to get our thread and needle back to the starter thread so we can tie it off. To do so, you want to snake back through your project, going through geckos and 15s to get to the middle of the blossom. Once you get to the middle of the blossom, and I'm just, like I said, kind of snaking back through those seed beads along the top. Once you get those thread ends right next to one another, which I'm about to achieve, you're just simply going to tie a knot to finish them off. I'm just going to sew back through that 11-0. That brings my thread ends right next to one another. Take the needle off and go ahead and tie. I'm going to tie a nice tight knot. And this time a square knot, right over left, left over right. If you have a pliers sitting handy, you can grab the thread end with the pliers if you want. If your hands are slippery, kind of do a nice yank. From there, I will grab my thread burner, take those edges of thread, burn them down, and then you can kind of see on the side there, move that pip out of the way, you can kind of burn them down nice and flat, so that way the knot that I just tied will not come apart. From there, I have my large blossoms finished. So I have my 3 large blossoms. You can continue building large blossoms. You can go with smaller blossoms. You can make as many as the large blossoms as you would like to in order to kind of do your design if you want to continue on with those large blossoms. You can also increase the size of them by just going around and starting to add more layers of the pips. From here, I would suggest continuing to make however many of the large blossoms you want. And now I'm going to go in and show you how to do the smaller blossoms that have an additional row of gecko beads. So they're going to have an additional row of gecko beads and none of the pip beads on them. And then those I will be using in my design. I'm going to end up with 4 of the small blossoms and 3 of the larger blossoms. So go ahead and make your bigger blossoms while they're fresh in your mind. You can pause this video, come back to it, and then join me as we make the smaller blossoms. So now if you've completed all of your large blossoms, we're going to go ahead and get started with our small blossoms. The small blossoms here are a great refresher also how you're actually going to get started with those larger blossoms. So for our smaller blossoms, I'm grabbing some thread off my spool here. I'll show you guys while I'm doing this exactly how I do it. Burn it down, grab your pliers and kind of squash down the end of that thread. And you're simply going to grab your needle and do your thread end. So the smaller blossoms are only gecko beads, so they don't use any of the actual pips. So if you've already done your pip design and you have the larger blossoms done, you can kind of push those pips to the back. I also encourage you guys, like all the videos that I do, to experiment and try it on your own and kind of see what you guys come up with. So I'm going to get a couple more geckos here laying out for me, and we're going to make these smaller blossoms. The smaller blossoms, again, starting out the exact same way. So if you've made a couple, you're in the habit now of grabbing 6 geckos with a 15-0 seed bead between each. You can see I'm kind of just going back and forth, adding the 15, and then the gecko, and then the 15. And once you get your 6th one on, same deal. We're going down to the first inch of our thread and tying them in a round loop. I have them tied then, and I'm going to pull that thread end nice and tight so I have my little gecko loop. The needle and thread then is going to go back through a gecko, so you're coming out of a gecko. When we're out of a gecko, here's where we're going to go through every other bead. So we're coming out of bead 1, we're going to sew into bead 3 and bead 5. To do so, add a 11-0, gecko 11-0, skip over the 15-0s in the gecko, and sew through the 3rd gecko in line. Again, do this 2 more times, adding a gecko with 11-0s on either side. Skip the next gecko and seed beads, and sew through gecko number 5. Again, 1 more set, sewing through gecko number 1, which is what your thread was originally coming out of. It must be stuck on the knot there, it doesn't want to go through. Give a nice little tight yank. All right, from there, the original 6 geckos are going to kind of sit separate a little bit. 3 are going to punch to the top and 3 are going to sit down a little bit lower. From the back here, I want to build, so you want to be able to see all of your 11-0s. If you can see a lot of the 15 O's, make sure to kind of push those front geckos to the front, and you want to keep the back 11 O's exposed. After going through seed bead 1, you want to bring your needle and thread up through the first set of 11 O's gecko 11 O that you just added on that second pass around. To start our third pass, it's the same as the last one, adding an 11 gecko 11, and then sewing into the 11 gecko 11 from the previous row. What this is going to do is put another set of geckos, so 3 more on, that are going to sit behind kind of that empty gecko there, where you only have 1. And so over to the next 11 gecko 11 that you added on the previous second row. And I'm going to finish up here with my third row. Adding in the 11 gecko 11, sewing then through the 11 gecko 11 from the second row. When I'm done there, I have my little triangle, kind of like it looked like last time. From here, then I went on and I added a pip with a 15-0 between each of my beads to get my larger blossom. To get my smaller blossom here, when you flip over, you can kind of see what we're going to do is actually add 2 blossoms, or 2 of our geckos in place, and kind of go between the pips. To do so and to add the next row in between our beads here, we are going to, when we're coming out of that 11-0, we're going to go through the 11-0. So coming out that 11-0, sorry about that, you're going to go through the 11 gecko 11 that you just added this row. Coming out the 11-0 seed bead, then we're going to add our next row of our geckos, which start with a 15, a gecko, an 11, a gecko, and a 15. From there, scoot over to your next grouping that you just added and sew through the 11 gecko and 11. Give a nice tight pull, and that puts those 2 geckos kind of to the side. Again, I'm coming out an 11-0. I'm adding a 15, gecko, 11, gecko, 15, skipping over the third row of geckos, or second row rather, and going into that third row. Going into the 11 gecko 11 and coming out. From there, I have 1 more grouping to add in of my 15 gecko 11 gecko 15. From there, I'm going back over to the original gecko bead in the original 11-0. And go through the 11 gecko and the 11. And that'll bring you basically back right to the start of that last row that you just added. When you flip it over, you can see, like I said, it has a tiny bit of a triangular shape, but you don't really realize it when you're looking at it. What this final row is going to do is add another 6 of your gecko beads into place. From there, we're going to add our flower cup, just like we did on our previous ones, going back kind of to our last row of our geckos that we had the geckos just one time around. So we're going to basically move back from this row where we added 2 geckos at a time. I'm going to sew through the 11-0 and the gecko and the 11-0 from the previous row of geckos. So you're just kind of scooting down to the next row back. From there, 2 seed beads go on, and I sew to the top. I always want to add my flower cup, but it's not going to fit through there. So I sew my 2 seed beads, push the geckos back a little bit from the center, then grab your flower cup up through the stem, out through the top. When you're at the top of the flower cup, add an 11-0 to keep it in place, and then back down through the flower cup. From here, to tighten it up and to put it right into that middle, kind of move the geckos back and pull that thread and needle nice and tight. Take the needle and thread back through the center of the flower, so you're coming out at the back of the blossom. When I'm back there too, I'll do a nice tight pull, so I make sure that I don't have any extra thread exposed or showing. When you push down, then kind of the center little geckos will sit right nice up and right near your flower. Coming out the back, then you'll see those 2 geckos or 2 11-0s that you added before putting on the flower cup. We're going to add 2 more 11-0s, scoot over to the seed bead directly across from it, and sew through the seed bead as well as the gecko. Get that tail out of the way and give a nice tight pull, making sure that you have your flower cup in there nice and tight. From there, it's time to get rid of our thread. And again, all I'm going to do is kind of sew back through the project, zigzagging to get to my thread ends together. So I'm zigzagging through the 10 or the 11, then back through the 15 and the gecko. Sewing back then through the gecko that my thread was coming out of. So this is a good lesson for you of how you can kind of do a repair. So I tried to force my needle through that gecko, and because we're on camera, I will show you guys how to repair this. So if you ever have a bead that breaks like that and has a mishap, I'm going to show you guys how to sew it in. So the reason it broke is because I was trying too hard to force it through and there was a knot blocking it. What I should have done is sewed below it and behind it. Instead, what I'm going to do now is cover up that area with a new gecko. So my thread and needle are coming out from that original row of my 6 geckos. I'm adding a new gecko and I'm sewing into the next bead in that 6th row, or that original row of 6. Pull nice and tight, and because of this floral design, you're not going to see it. From there, I'm going to sew around that original 6 beads the whole way around, so that way I make sure I don't lose any of the tension. So this is kind of a lesson learned. And rather than stop the camera, it's a good opportunity for you to learn how to deal with mistakes. So you can see I've sewed halfway around. You can't even tell that that gecko kind of popped out of there. That's because of the design. Other designs, you may have to backtrack and kind of rethread. The other thing, these you can make so quickly, you can just burn the thread apart with your thread burner and start over. That's another option. So I'm coming the whole way around now to get back to my starter thread. Once I'm back next to the starter thread, that just like I did previously, all I'm going to do is tie those 2 thread ends together and make sure that I have a nice knot. Going through that bead that I added, I'm also going to go down a row and connect it in there, since it did connect in there originally. Connecting to the 11-0. Coming out the 11-0 then, I'll tie those 2 thread ends together. And have a nice finished blossom. Once the blossom is finished, just like the other one, I take my thread burner and I am going to grab that burner and burn down the edges of my thread. From there then, I will show you guys how we are going to get ready to actually attach that to the chain, because we're pretty much going to sit it right on top of the beading chain to get that fun kind of design in there. We're going to be sitting these little flowering pieces right on the chain and kind of stringing them almost right through the chain to get the design. The nice thing about this design is you can really play around with the design. You can make one flowering pip there kind of in the middle, one of those blossoms. You can make a bunch of the small gecko blossoms. I really like kind of that collar look that's going on, and I'll move it up a little bit so you guys can see. So I'm going to keep them rather close on my design and get them onto my chain. So now it's time to assemble the necklace. If you want to, along the back of the design, we actually have those 4 seed beads on every single one of our pips, our pips and our actual gecko beads that kind of line up. That's what's holding the flower cup in place. If you want to and you just want to do it with seed beads and you don't want to have the chain look, you can take seed beads, just 11 O's, 15 O's, whatever you want, and just string the whole necklace design on that kind of scale that you're just stringing right along the back. These would also be really cute pins as well as pendants. Same deal, you could put a little loop on it coming right out the top. I want it to sit on chain because I think that gives it a nice modern look. And I have my 16 inches of chain that I cut, and I have so that 1.5 feet. If you want a longer necklace, you may want to have more chain. I'm going to start in the middle of the chain and build my way out because I want it to sit kind of evenly on the chain with the spacing between the same number of links. I'm using a oval chase chain or an oval regular kind of beading chain, with the ovals being 4 millimeter basically long by 2.5 or 3 wide. I'm going to center my flowers so that they're hanging down a little bit and they're not right along the center of those seed beads. That would be the easiest way and the nicest way to do it. I'll do that for the small ones to kind of keep them up, but the bigger ones I want them to hang down a little bit. So starting with the one in the center, you're going to kind of flip it over, and we're going to take that center piece of chain and we're going to lay it over so that it is over the top half of my pips. So again, we have 12 pips on here. If I lay it over so it's over 6, that's not the top half. What I want to do is lay it over approximately about 4 of my pips. So you can see it's just kind of laying over the back there. I have my thread and needle, and what I want to do is sew through the 11 O that's next to one of those 4 pips. The thread's just kind of hanging out the bottom and just sitting there. I'm going to then sew through 1 link of chain and literally sew it onto the chain. To sew it onto the chain, you want to think about it almost as being like a button that I'm sewing onto that link of chain, and then I'm going to go back through that same 11 O seed bead. So I sewed through the 11 O, through the chain, and now I'm sewing back through the 11 O. When I pull it then, you'll see that it kind of pulls that piece of chain there, and it's hanging out right in the middle there. From there, I'm going to do it one more time, so it's just like sewing on a button, going through the 11 O and through the link of chain. Out from there, and there I have my first little piece attached to my chain. From here, I'm going to go straight across then over to the next seed bead, making sure that the chain is pulled tight behind the back of the project. To do so, I'm going to take the thread and needle and sew through that last row of pips all the way over till I get to that 4th pip. So I'm sewing through the 11 O's and the pips right along the end. So again, this isn't the easiest method, but I'm really going to like the look of it. Sewing through. Another thing you could do is you could use some ultra suede and actually glue the ultra suede to the back of each of the flowers and then glue it over the chain, basically. So glue the chain behind and then put some ultra suede over it. Through the pip. And then once I'm out, so again I said I wanted to do 4, so I'm through my 4th pip. Here's my first one that my chain is attached to, and I went through 2, 3, 4, and I want to come out the seed bead. When I come out the seed bead, I'm also going to catch the chain, one of the links of chain that's strung straight through. Sew through the chain and back through the 11-0. Again, then through the chain, looping it back around, and through the 11-0. So I'm doing at least 2 loops on each. You can see that gets, when you flip it over, that gets that pip kind of sitting right nicely, and it's going to sit nice on that chain. From here, I'm going to take my thread and needle and get that tail out of the way. The thread and needle then is going to go, get that chain out of the way, back through the 11-0, one more time, and then back over to that starting piece of thread, going back through the 11s and the pips, and I'm simply going to tie a knot. So going through then all of these right to the other side. This is going to repeat for every one. How far you put between your beads and how far you put between the actual chain links is up to you. You just want to make sure that the chain behind the actual blossom is nice and tight and that it's not kind of drooping down in the middle, because that'll make your necklace a little droopy. So again, I'm going back up through that row over so I can tie off to that original thread on the side. Once you're done sewing onto the chain and linking all of them on, you have your necklace completed, and they're all linked on and all chain all together. Again, if you wanted to, you could sew them on together with some seed beads. I preferred the chain, and what I did was added all of the larger flowering or blooming geckos first, and then went back in and added the smaller ones as well. And they're just quick stitched onto the back of there as well, just going 3 chain links wide. When you hold it up, they might kind of flip around on you. When you put it on, then they will kind of lay nicely on your neck as you're wearing your necklace. The final thing that I need to do is just add my clasp, and I'm just going to do that with some jump rings off camera and get that necklace completed, and I may even wear it this evening. If you need any of the materials for this necklace, again, you can go back to the beginning of the video to the little eye in the corner and get the information there, or below the video to the little description of what the video is about, the date that it's from, and all of that. Again, it's a fun use of the new gecko beads and the pip beads, which I think work wonderfully together, as well as those flower cups in there. You can go to town, make some earrings, make some necklaces, make some bracelets, linking these all together and having really a lot of fun with these components. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to get regular updates on different beads like the geckos and kind of see what those are about, as well as regular patterns like this blooming gecko's necklace. You can subscribe and we'll send you notifications of that as well. You can also stay connected with us at PotomacBeads.com as well as on our Facebook page. Also, if you get a chance, ask to become a member of our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. It's a wonderful way to interact with other people that love to make jewelry. They'll answer questions, help with color choices and design ideas, and really it's a great interactive group with people that love to design, and you get great inspiration and ideas from it as well. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have fun going to town making this blooming necklace. And like I said, make some variations, show us on that Facebook group, and we'd love to see what you guys make. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and have fun creating.